Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, GCP, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
Ryan,
and Peter.
Episode 200, recorded for February 15th, 2023. Now you can make bad cloud decisions like running EKS on SNO. Good evening, Ryan and Jonathan. How's it going?
It's going well. Happy that we've made 200 finally. The last 10 have been like an eternity for some reason.
That was not how I felt about it. I felt like I was, it was flying by at one moment because I had plans for 200, and then I said, I'm not going to do that because I ran out of time, and so we'll save it for 250.
Yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed the new format and the more conversation we've been having, but I feel like we got to kind of like 190, 191. That seems like such a long time ago.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the fact that January went by the fastest month ever in my lifetime, also the slowest month ever in my lifetime, which is sort of a weird oxymoron, or I don't know, conflicting statement, but it felt slow and fast all at the same time. So, and the fact that it's already February 15th also blows my mind. So every day feels like dog days, and then it's like we're already mid-February. So
I think time is a construct I no longer understand.
Yeah, clearly pandemic broke time for me because that's how I see it. But yeah, no, we've gotten really good feedback on the new format, and I think today we actually wrap up our Cloud Center of Excellence topic. So then we'll pivot into one of the other ones starting next week. Which, if you guys have a topic idea that you want us to talk about, we would love to get your suggestions. We can, and we'll see if we can turn it into a series, or you could even do a question show occasionally as well if you want to submit questions to us either through Twitter or Mastodon or our Slack channel, or email pod@thecloudpod.net. Come to me. So there's lots of options on how we're going to send that. But yeah, CCOE is going to wrap up today, and then I think we're moving into a new topic, which we have not decided for next week. That was the business we forgot to do before the show. We can cover that later. So I don't know what that's going to be next week, but it'll be fun. Peter is out tonight, unfortunately, so he missed 200 episode. But listeners are kind of used to Peter not being here sometimes, so it's okay. Let's get into the news. AWS Graviton 3-based general purpose M7g and R7g instances are now available to you, meaning that the Graviton 3 has now basically gone to all of the major instance types that people care about. The C's have them, the M's have them, now the R's have them. These are the most popular instances, especially R's for databases and M's for Java. So this is a really nice addition, and they are pretty beefy boxes for you. So the M7g Medium is your smallest size option, which is a 1 vCPU, 4 gigabytes of memory, with up to 12.5 gigabytes per second of network and up to 10 gigabytes per second of EBS volume throughput, which is a pretty healthy medium-sized box, actually. All the way up to the M7g 16X large or metal configuration with 16 vCPU, 256 gigs of memory, 30 gigabits per second of networking access, and 20 gigabits per second of EBS access. So those are pretty nice. They cost you anywhere from $29.78 to $1,900.06 per month in a US region. Other regions, your pricing will vary. R7g also comes to you in the medium to 16X large, but the shapes are slightly different. The medium gives you 1 vCPU and 8 gigs of RAM, and the same up to 12.5 gigabits per second of network and 10 gigabits per second of EBS. And the 16X large gets you 64 Graviton 3 vCPUs with 512 gigs of memory and 30 gigs of throughput and 20 gigs of throughput to the EBS. So all for the low price of $39.12 for that medium and $2,501 for the 16X large instance. So actually, that's a pretty good price for the price performance you're getting here. It's a pretty nice box.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think it's, there's, if you don't have, something that's going to leverage a bunch of, CPU cores, this will run most everything. I think this is as beefy as, most of my home servers. And, I run way too much stuff on those things. So this is fantastic. It's something like a nickel an hour or something like that. Like trying to reverse the math, but it's kind of cool.
See, I was trying to be nice because normally I try to get the pennies per hour, and then I just stumble through it in the tenths of pennies. So I just summarized it to a month, and now you're trying to go backwards. Are you kidding me right now?
Well, I only understand one metric. How do I compare? Yeah.
I was just trying to compare like the old C6G to the C7G. They're not that difference in price, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, the 25 to 30% performance improvement is it works out to an improvement in price if you scale the workloads properly.
Yeah, so the C7G medium is 0.0363 an hour versus the C7G 16X large is $2.32 an hour. And I'm not going to look at the R's, but the C6Gs were basically 0.34 cents per hour. And the largest one of these is a 16X large C6G, and that one is $2.17 per hour. So, yeah, a little bit more expensive, but again, better price per performance, up to 30% typically between the Graviton 2 and the Graviton 3 per the metrics.
Very nice.
Yeah, I might go change some instance types when I have some free time this weekend, because I do typically use the M series on spot market, and I'm sure if that's the list prices in the spot market, it's in good shape. So I can pick up some boxes. Well, this is a weird announcement. I don't fully understand the use case, but you can apparently now run EKS anywhere on Snowball devices. This new capability automates the creation and management of Kubernetes clusters on AWS Snowball Edge compute optimized devices with AWS optimization and support for containerized workloads. Need to run at edge locations without reliable internet connections or self-managed hardware. You can get them as a pay-as-you-go pricing, or you can commit to a Snowball Edge at your location for 1 year or 3 years to keep this running, I guess, in your warehouse or something else. And seems like an interesting model. I don't fully understand the use case on, but yeah, apparently you can do this now.
It kind of seems like a poor man's Outposts, really.
Yeah,
at this point.
Yeah, you don't want to spend $300,000 a month. We'll send you a couple EKS Anywhere boxes on Snow Edge. You just run that instead.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of I'm wondering if the market has shifted to where the use case originally of Snow and Snowballs was to get data into AWS out of your data center, and I wonder if it's shifted a bit. Because the ability to run compute sort of tasks, which makes sense, right? You're going to do, transformation or something along those lines. But to need to do that offline is interesting. And it makes me wonder exactly, has this become different than what we're expecting, where there's creating ways to get data into AWS, or these poor man outposts used for temporary events? Or
I mean, I see temporary events maybe making sense. I could maybe see use cases where you're collecting a lot of data locally that you don't necessarily want to send it over the wire for sensitivity reasons to Google Cloud, but you need to archive it there. And so you ship one every month to yourself and you swap them out, and maybe you do some lightweight processing with EKS to normalize data maybe. Those maybe make sense. Or it's a ship that's transiting the Atlantic, that's collecting metrics and telemetry, and then at the end of the ship gets to where it goes, you pack it up and ship it back to AWS and then process all the data. I guess those are potential use cases where there's just massive amounts of data that's just not practical to send to AWS directly over the internet, because you're using satellite connectivity or using something else expensive. Maybe that all makes sense. But again, this isn't my use cases. So if this is your use case, we would love to hear from you and hear what you use it for, because that'd be great to know.
I kind of wonder if there's one of these riding around in the back of all the Amazon Zoox driverless cars.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Are they back of all the Amazon Prime delivery vans too?
Yep.
Yeah.
I somehow missed the announcement, but you can run all kinds of compute on these things. Like you could run Lambda.
Lambda and VM instances have been a thing for a while. Even the fact that when Jonathan and I got the little snowball, which I don't remember what it's called, a snow cone. When we got it to play with it, it came prepackaged with a Amazon Linux 2 image I had loaded on it, so I could run it on a little box. So those are definitely uses that you could, similar thing. But again, it was EKS is just a lot of overhead for that use case.
Sure.
Where if I can run a couple of VM instances that run my use case, why do I need EKS?
Yeah, and if you think about the idea of this being offline, I guess you could maybe preload it with like the images and configurations. Yeah,
that's actually part of the setup process. So when you go to the website and you basically sign up for it, it's one of the things you have to do is actually tell it which images you want loaded onto the device for the AMIs, so you can get that all built out in advance.
Actually, really interesting article recently. It was about Chick-fil-A and their use of Kubernetes, and they ship out was it Intel NUC devices to all their stores, and they remotely manage Kubernetes clusters in all their stores. I mean, I guess if renting one of these for 3 years at a time is more affordable, get the hardware swapped out if there's an issue. Maybe it does make sense. This is it's all of a sudden become an edge compute device rather than a storage device.
Yeah. Again, I'd love to hear real world use cases because I'm sure they exist. It's not an area that I've had to do, but yeah, storefront. But again, stores you typically are connected to via DSL or some relatively reasonable Wi-Fi network or cell phone network these days. So connectivity is not really a problem at a store. But yeah, in the case of EKS running on a Intel NUC, for high availability, it's cheaper than running a VMware cluster on store, which is a very typical prior pattern. So that makes some sense to me from a store perspective.
I liked your ship theory. That's a good one. I can see the rugged packaging of these things being a factor there, and it's kind of a you don't want to pay for a satellite uplink for that entire thing, if you don't have to. So
yeah, that's the most obvious use case to me is something that's moving that has a massive amount of telemetry like a ship, all the engine metrics, all of the satellite imaging, all the navigation data points, the tidal data, all that factors into a bunch of things that they might want to collect and use for other purposes. That just makes sense.
Spy balloons, I'm telling you. Spy
balloons, that's it, yeah. Again, FBI, we are not interested in buying a snowball device for balloons at this moment. Well, another exciting development, if you're into ruggedized devices, is a new ruggedized container called the AWS Modular Data Center, or AWS MDC for short. Unfortunately, if you're not part of the U.S. Department of Defense Joint Warfighting Cloud Capability Program, you can't get this. But if you are, you get this new fancy containers. Basically, they're saying for the cloud would be perfect for many military applications, but may be difficult to reach in the field for the same satellite reasons the snowball devices are problematic. So AWS has announced the AWS Modular Data Center MDC. This new service provides DoD customers the ability to deploy compute and storage capabilities to support large-scale workloads wherever they need it, including in disconnected, disrupted, intermittent, and limited environments. Each AWS MDC comes pre-configured with a high-availability data center infrastructure, including internal networking, cooling and power distribution equipment, and deploy compute and storage capabilities. AWS MDC supports both AWS Outposts or AWS Snowball Edge devices and can be scaled through the deployment of additional modular data center units to support customer requirements. AWS MDC is available to U.S. government customers who are eligible for the Joint Warfighting Cloud Capability Contract, and the service is currently supported from the GovCloud US West and US East regions.
Now we have our answer about why they put EKS anywhere on Snowball one.
yeah.
So you're gonna get an AWS modular data center loaded with snowballs versus versus getting the the Outpost. I go with the Outpost personally.
Well, it depends if you have the uplink connectivity. I think Outposts require connectivity to the data centers for managing the services. So I think that this is sort of like maybe the cheater way of doing that. Although I don't know if connectivity comes as part of the MDC.
Yeah, it didn't. I didn't get to that many specifics of the details of the announcement to see if it had telco requirements. But again, if it's in a ruggedized container, you can ship anywhere in the world. It makes sense that would be disconnected,
isolated.
So, they did not announce any pricing on this. I was sort of sad about it. Because I was curious how much this costs.
All the monies.
I could contact an AWS sales rep to find out. But since I don't have the JWCC credential, I don't think they'll tell me. But maybe I can get a Freedom of Information Act on it someday. Let's see. But it's interesting that this is a part of the Joint Warfighting Cloud Capability, which is the new version of JEDI, basically. But it's a multi-cloud JEDI. It's sort of interesting because this has clearly been in development for a while. This didn't just appear when they announced that contract a few months back. So this has been probably in the work for quite a while.
No, the concept's been around for quite a while as well, right? With their their partnership with Verizon for 5G, doing sort of compute at the edge of that network, and even back in the early days of computer science, making a whole bunch of really dense compute modular, and so it could be moved around easily. It's definitely a thing. So it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The idea in general isn't new. I remember seeing an AT&T data center in the box like 20 years ago, basically the same kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Although much rather use AWS Cloud than a AT&T colo.
Yeah. sure.
Let's move over to GCP. And GCP.
Do we have to?
I mean, unfortunately.
All right, go on.
So apparently, GCP has identified that some organizations find it hard to make predictions about the future, especially when putting a toe into the cloud journey that they may not fully understand quite yet. And so one of the things that you learn very quickly if you're using Google is if you want any of the advanced capabilities or access to different CUD things, etc., you need to have a committed use agreement of some sort, but no more. The new ways for customers to consume and pay for Google Cloud services is available to you, including the new Flex agreement, which is for those companies who don't have the future predictability to make a multi-year commitment. The Flex agreement allows you to move your workload to the cloud with no upfront commitment, but you still get access to unique incentives such as monthly spend discounts, committed use discounts, cloud credits, and access to professional services based on monthly spend and workloads migrated to Google Cloud. This is in addition to the capabilities for the Innovator Plus annual subscription and the Google Cloud Scale Boost we talked about previously in the show. They also talked about the new Flexible Cuds, which they announced at Google Cloud Next. But apparently, to further differentiate, they will be launching new product pricing editions for several Google Cloud portfolio products that will include a new Standard Edition, Enterprise, and Enterprise Plus Edition. These will roll out to some services. They won't be for all. And they gave an example of an Enterprise Plus differentiation for the regulated industry like banking and public sector, which would include the ability to provide HA, multi-region support, regional failover, and disaster recovery, advanced security, and a broad range of regulatory compliance support, which kind of freaks me out a little bit because that just seems like complexity, but we'll talk about that more in a second. And the last part of this article is increased granularity of your BigQuery auto-scaling so you can never pay more than what you need, allows you to provision more capacity in smaller increments, plus the new BigQuery autoscaler is now in public preview to you as well. But we go back to that enterprise differentiation thing. So I Enterprise Plus, if it gives you HA and multi-region support and regional failover and disaster recovery, and they're just going to handle all of that for me, that's fine. Okay, I'll pay for that. If you're telling me that I can't get those things unless I pay for Enterprise Plus, that's not going to be okay. So the details of this are going to be where all the devils are.
Yeah, no, I read this and had the same sort of reaction, which is like, I get, dedicated capacity in alternate regions and paying for that, that part makes sense to me. But yeah, the way that this was worded makes me really wonder, like, if you don't have these committed agreements in place, like, are you like, what exactly are you subject to? And so it is sort of an interesting, like, oh, well, we're not going to offer you support for if you need to fail over your service to an alternate region in case of like a failure or an HA, like that's kind of strange.
Yeah. Well, like, they have features on Google Cloud, like geo-replicated buckets, for example, right? So it's a bucket, has a single API endpoint. You write to it, it writes data to two regions. And all of you people on Amazon just said, they do what? Yes, they do this as a native thing. Amazon just got a capability to do it, sort of. Excuse me. But if that goes away, and now you have to do it all the old manual way with standard, that just is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's weird because all those things are things that you build on top of the cloud using the tools they provide today. So either they're managing those things for you by providing tools for like disk replication and all that other stuff, or it doesn't kind of make any sense, really.
And the announcement itself is pretty vague on the details, and so like it's sort of one of those things where you're like, oh, I'm going to ask some questions about this, to the communities and then account reps, and because I agree, it's in the details, and it's less about what's in these flex agreements, but it's what's included in the promise of these flex agreements, and everything else that's not part of these flex agreements is what I want to know, right? Like I get committed use, and those make sense to me, but I didn't realize that some of these things were part of a support package that only comes with some level of commitment.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of, but the thing is, once you get into that multi-year commitment, you also lose access to the spend discount, where basically they give you a discount for the longer your server's running. So there's pluses and minuses. There's lots of gotchas in the cloud pricing model from GCP that are things you only learn once you're on it, and you get some nuance to it that it's been eye-opening to me. Some of the things I've learned about Google Cloud as I've now supported it for over a year. just its abilities or inabilities to do things that seem just kind of obvious to other cloud providers. But I'm sure I'll figure out what it's really strong at one day.
I think we should change the show title now. It should be like, great, ultra premium discs now available on Google Cloud. It's like, really, I really dislike the whole tiered service thing. Either it's available or it's not available, and you pay for it.
Yeah.
Agreed. Well, if you want to talk about saving money between your ultra tier and premium tier, one of the great places to do that would be with the Finops Foundation. And they have a new member because Microsoft has joined the Finops Foundation as a premier member of the governing board, defining strategy and vision of the organization. There's a quote here from Vivek Dalvi, Corporate Vice President of Commerce Platform Experiences at Microsoft. I'm very enthusiastic about our partnership with our Finops Foundation and our membership as part of the Finops community. Optimizing cloud workloads is more important than ever for companies of all sizes and all industries. For Microsoft, this collaboration with the Finops Foundation and our industry partners will empower Microsoft Cloud customers and partners to leverage the cost management best practices and industry standard operating procedures cultivated by the Finops community. And apparently, Azure is hoping to work on defining specification and evolving best practices, like implementing best practices around FinOps open cost and usage specification or focus. They're looking to align their collective guidelines between the Cloud Adoption Framework, Azure Well Architected Framework, and Microsoft Cost Management products. They want to improve those products with feedback from the foundation, and they want to be able to provide advanced training content for Azure set FinOps capabilities, as well as certify relevant Microsoft FinOps teams on the FinOps Foundation practices and engage with the 8,700 members and growing, which I am one of those 8,700, so super interesting. J.R. Stormont, the executive director of the FinOps Foundation, had to say, Microsoft is a bellwether technology leader who's aligned to our vision of accelerating the growth of FinOps practitioners with its presence, leadership, and innovation. They welcome Microsoft as a premier member, as its membership will be a huge asset to large FinOps community and development and maturation of best practices across industries and the world.
Does this mean like FinOps isn't cool anymore because Microsoft is part of it?
I mean, Azure already made the cloud uncool, so this is just the extension of that.
I mean, a move like this makes a lot of sense. It's a way to get, documentation standards and stuff as part of the FinOps Foundation. Mention Azure and Azure technologies. It's a way that building the training regime is a way to expose your cloud services to a new community. And it's, overall, I think this is a good statement or a good move just because it'll make the FinOps community even more stronger.
Yeah, it's interesting because it really leaves. So Google Cloud's a premier member for quite a while, as well as Microsoft, but AWS is not a member. I believe they have people who are members of the FinOps community. I would have to bet it, but they're definitely not a premier member like Microsoft and Google. So that's sort of interesting.
I guess it's also a way to get their products and their messages out to the FinOps audience. I mean, they've got a whole group of people who care about the cost of cloud, and they're not hearing from Microsoft right now about any of their products or what any of their products can do for them. So I'm sure it's a little self-serving, but ultimately good that they'll become part of the ecosystem and realize that people want to save money. People don't want to be gouged.
Especially in a recession, it's a great time to be saying, "Hey, we're supporting FinOps and we're supporting saving money through our membership of the foundation." So, we're curious to see now if with Google and Microsoft being part of it, if Amazon sees it necessary to join as well to have the same conversation. But it'll be interesting to see over the next period of time as we continue down the path.
They'd have to commit to restructuring their cost and usage reports, which will never happen.
So true.
Yeah, I'm not sure they will.
Yeah,
total opinion piece, but they have their well architected system in place which deals with cost control and a lot of things. I think they've already got a lot of this stuff covered as part of their existing offerings. I don't know that they would get any advantage from being part of the FinOps Foundation.
Yeah, other than thought leadership and showing the partnership with the community, which would be great. It's sort of interesting because Amazon sort of gets that feeling all the time of like, well, we invented the space, so why should we be involved in the community that formed around the space we created? And I think that's sort of a flawed approach, which is why they get a lot of crap for how they treat open source. But again, it wouldn't hurt them. What is it? I don't know what a premier membership costs, but what $100,000, $200,000 a year to sponsor something like this, to say you're part of it and you have a voice on the board, seems like a reasonable thing. But just my 2 cents.
Have you been waiting months and months to hire your new AWS, GCP, or Azure architect, only to have them be poached at the 11th hour by a startup with a juice bar? Initiatives stalled because you're having trouble hiring? Well, I have a simple solution: Foghorn Consulting. Foghorn Consulting provides top-notch cloud engineers to the world's most innovative companies and can be burning down your DevOps and cloud backlogs as soon as next week. Foghorn certified AWS, GCP, and Azure professionals are armed with infrastructure as code, and from day one will be designing performant, optimized cloud-native or hybrid environments that deliver on the promise of cloud. Their FogOps solution even provides on-demand cloud engineering to augment your existing teams. Visit www.foghornconsulting.com or send an email to cloudtalentnow@foghornconsulting.com and tell them the CloudPod sent you. Your dedicated FogOps team is with you for the long haul, and they bring their own juice.
All right. Well, Oracle has a story that caught my attention. They're apparently redefining banking software as a service with the introduction of Oracle Banking Cloud Services. This new suite of componentized, composable cloud-native applications are available on OCI globally. The suite builds on Oracle's decades-long commitment to the financial services industry, the deep portfolio of award-winning financial services applications, and the power of Oracle Cloud to deliver the most comprehensive offering of cloud-native SaaS solutions to banking. Apparently, those cutting-edge features include 9 core elements, including highly scalable processing on Oracle Coherence Data Grid, which is super expensive, perfect. Microservices-based architecture that allows banks to compose their solutions by embedding or integrating with Oracle Banking Cloud Services seamlessly. Only take you 3 years to get through change management. Industrialized architecture that forms the basis of Oracle services across all industries, offering their banking clients the reliability and performance of using one of the most battle-tested SaaS architectures available for mission-critical solutions. Really, Oracle? Okay. Security that incorporates the 3 R's: rotate, repave, and repair. Third-party attestations and pen testing, making Oracle Banking Cloud Services the most trusted suite of banking SaaS. And the availability of Oracle Banking Cloud Services and redundant footprints and regions, which is just a cloud thing, but sure, it's a banking thing too, I guess. And then resiliency and ensured via cross-regional deployments, cost-effective SaaS by virtue of using various flexible compute shapes of resources available in OCI and cost models, optimized usability through a templated Oracle integrated cloud, and integrated technology stack from application enablers to database to cloud, ensure end-to-end automation, and a homogeneous platform that delivers superior reliability and stability, as well as trusted SLAs of the unbreakable Oracle Cloud.
So the suite builds on Oracle's decades-long commitment to the people with the most money.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out if this is like banking branded Beanstalk, right? Or like what exactly is a part of this service? Because it is kind of interesting. Like,
yeah. Well, like when you talk about the banking cloud services, but you're redefining banking SaaS. So is this Oracle ERP for banking, but now offered to you as OCI, but then you talk about all these OCI capabilities? Like the branding is a little muddled, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if it's actually any kind of new product at all, or whether it's just, like I say, targeting a vertical.
It's probably just targeting a vertical, but just funny. They're redefining banking SaaS. So there you go. All right, well, let's move on to our Cloud Journey series, where we're doing our final installment on CCOE. It feels like it was just yesterday we started this. Again, going back to our commentary at the beginning of the show about the month of January, February flying by. And this week we're talking about automating the CCOE. So we talked about structuring it, we talked about securing it, we talked about infrastructure fundamentals around networking and VPC design. And this week we're talking all about how do you automate it, and then cover metrics and how do you track Cloud Center of Excellence metrics for adoption and various other success criteria you might think about. So first up, one of the areas that I really enjoyed automating in my CCOE journey with both of you in a prior life was a little thing we called account management. And it was all about basically establishing our guardrails and establishing them in those days, and as a partnership with a third party. But now you can use things like OPA, or you could use Sentinel policies, et cetera, to really start codifying all those guardrails and saying, look, our VPCs are going to be in this design and this spec, and if you go into the account and you change it, we're going to come back and change it back within 10 minutes. And that was one of the favorite things I enjoyed doing at that prior business. But what about you guys? What other things are you interested in the automation space?
Well, I think it's really interesting to see how the cloud providers have reacted towards, people automating things like account and project creation, just because, when we started, there wasn't any option for that. We had to build it. But now, I think all the cloud providers have some sort of multi-project or account vending strategy where it's cohesively driven from a centralized authority, which is perfect for, purposes of the CCOE. I think almost every CCOE starts with some wild west account that was being paid by a credit card directly by the, the engineering manager. And so now, it's about how to make that a real thing. And so it's important to sort of have that structure. And even if you're starting with a single account or project, you want to make sure that you're building something that can grow to multiples as you see fit.
Yeah, but be careful of those account vending machines. As we learned, you can create them really easily. Deleting them can be somewhat tricky. So be cautious about that part.
Yeah, no, that was a mistake learned the hard way. Closing accounts is hard.
Especially on AWS. Others like Google and Azure, you get the ability to just delete the project, and they'll say, do you want to delete all the things in the project? And you're like, yes, I do. And just takes care of it.
I think Amazon's fixed it now, but I haven't used it, so I don't know how easy it is. I think they offered the promise of an API.
Yeah, I think I've seen enough complaining still on Twitter about, phantom accounts still billing or, still being able to access resources that, were allegedly turned off in an account you deleted. I don't think it's completely fixed.
Yeah.
So,
no. Yeah, that's true.
It's sort of interesting too, because there's a lot of tooling you can buy on some of the stuff too. You mentioned the cloud vendors with their account management vending machine. A lot of them now have cloud posture management as a built-in feature, but there's lots of third parties like Palo Alto and some of the others who have a cloud security posture management capability that can help you do guardrails as well. So there's lots of interesting ways to kind of think about, are you going to go bespoke and write your own thing, or use open source with some of like the Capital One type technologies they've open sourced in this particular space? Are you going to buy a vendor, or are you going to use a cloud native solution? And I think that kind of goes back to defining, are you multi-cloud or single cloud, which will kind of help drive that decision. But there's lots of things that you want to probably be automating, all the policies, all the governance, how you attest to those things, how you validate group membership. That should all be really thought about from an automation perspective from day one as part of your long-term design. Even if you do it manually initially, how are you going to automate that? Because it gets complicated when you have 100 and some odd accounts. You've got multiple groups, you've got multiple people doing CI/CD, and the more automation you have here, the more lack of missing something can happen.
I was surprised that there weren't better tools earlier on. I mean, there's so many use cases where an account vending machines will be useful. Think about like Quick Labs and things where you're going to log in, do a task, 20 minutes later, you're going to tear it down again. The fact that that wasn't sort of productized and it was just off the shelf for anybody who wanted to use it really kind of blew me away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I remember asking for that for ages, right? Before Google bought them, it was like, I just need this part. Like, I'll take the training too, but what I really want is the account creation and tear it down part.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they had a lot of access to either private APIs from Amazon, with their partnership with them, or they engineered the crap out of it and just had massive amounts of cleanup scripting they wrote around all these limitations of AWS. But
I suspect the latter, actually. I mean,
I do as well.
Yeah.
I don't think Amazon gave them any special favors, especially when they got bought by Google. What you mentioned tagging, and so tagging is kind of interesting struggle for a lot of people, because especially if you've already established your cloud, you probably didn't tag it, and so that can cause you all kinds of issues. If you did create your center of excellence first, you hopefully talked about tagging as part of your security strategy, your access strategy, and your bill back cost management strategy as well. I think there is an opportunity around tagging. A lot of companies have server naming conventions, for example, and they have special codexes that'll help you decipher what all the special letters mean and how those things. And you can actually write automation if you've built your servers that way and name the server. You can pull that data out of DNS and you can parse that into tags. Or you could even take it out of a server name if that's displayed in the console as part of your server setup process. So there are ways to get to tagging automation without having to do a lot of work up front. Even if you have just some basic conventions that maybe you pulled over from your on-premise data center, those can get you started into tagging, which can be really helpful. And it's a great starting place to say, well, yeah, all that complexity we had in naming, yeah, we just moved it into tags. And that's where we started.
Yeah, now it doesn't have to be, fully qualified, domain compliant, and you get a lot more power in being able to assign key value pairs for that value, and then having the ability to have more than just the host name split on dot sort of methodology to target automation. So it's important to not only develop a tagging strategy as early as possible, but also however you plan on doing it, retrofit your resources in the cloud to bring in, and tag those older resources. Never assume that from day one you'll have all your resources tagged, because things like, an acquisition or a newly discovered experimental account that's in production, like these things happen in businesses. And so you have to be able to adapt and sometimes it's just going to be a lot of work and a matter of going through it, but it's it is a challenge, but it's super important and it's more powerful than people realize.
One of the areas you want to think about automating as well is the billing data and figuring out how to process that data. We talked about the CUR file earlier on the show. Once you have multiple accounts, that CUR file gets real big real quick. And so, being able to build automation to suck that data into Elasticsearch or into a BigQuery or into some other type of database that you can use and query regularly is going to be really helpful for you, especially as your CFO starts yelling at you about your costs, and making sure that you can really quickly try those costs back to business units, to products, to servers, and you're being able to do show back. And so, this is one of those areas where a lot of people will invest in tooling, but you really don't need the tooling if you just have someone who can focus on building it yourself. It's not super complicated. It's really just taking things that are pretty well defined in the billing data and then extracting them to the right fields and then being able to do joins across those fields in the right way to do the visualizations you want.
Pivot tables the win.
Excel will not help you in this though, because Excel will run out of fields very quickly.
Yeah, when you have 20 billion line items a month in the CUR file, that's a little beyond Excel.
Yeah, it's a little bit. Even probably beyond Google Sheets. So
it's one of those things, because one of the first questions you get in the Center of Excellence is, why did our bill go up by blah, right? Like, and it can be very difficult, especially if you put all this into automation and you have very self-service, capabilities, and so you're allowing your cloud platform. If you haven't instrumented the visibility of those things, it can be challenging to go figure out why it's $100,000 more expensive this month, or and it's it can take quite a detective sort of investigation, going through logs and looking at statements and invoices and trying to find the difference. It's and none of the tools really provide that ability to sort of just automatically hone in. It takes someone who is familiar with your workloads, understands the way things are laid out and where things are in terms of like your products that you're hosting, to really understand that and be able to provide that back to the business. Like, oh yeah, it was because this one team, doubled their size of their Elasticsearch cluster.
Yeah, but that's the easy ones to find, actually. So those are
those
are the ones that are in the CloudTrail log. You can find those. This person increased 3x the nodes or chose an X1 instance type. The more difficult things are like when the dev team deployed some new feature that's now sending data to some third-party SaaS service on the internet, and now you're paying egress fees at multi-petabytes per day. And those are not as easy to see in the CloudTrail log. So that's where the automation can come help you out again, because you'd see in the automation, oh, my egress costs out this NAT gateway in this particular account just jumped 6x or 10x. And then you at least have an account to go to. Then you can start focusing in on potentially what changed. And with flow logs and some of the other things we talked about in other episodes, you might be able to track this down pretty quickly. But without that visibility, answering that cloud question can get hard.
I mean, when we talked about what should have its own account and what shouldn't, I'm not sure we actually talked about cost management and cost visibility at that time. We talked about blast radius and all those other things, but I mean, since we do get per account and nothing more granular than that in terms of EC2 usage, networking usage, and things like that, it's ideal to segregate services that you need to be individually billable or individually reportable on their costs.
You can dimension cost by tag. Like that's why the tagging becomes super important. If you have everything in one account, you're only going to see a line item for EC2, but then you can using Cost Explorer tools or something like that, you can generate the reports to separate that out, but only if you have it tagged.
Not for networking though. I mean, networking is networking, isn't it? For the whole VPC.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Tagging doesn't go very deep.
Yeah, any kind of centralized egress, right? Like that's going to be tricky. If you've routed everything through, a routing layer to a centralized point, you're just going to see the overall thing spend. You're going to have to do a lot of analysis on, that traffic, what's generating the traffic to do that. It's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's even worse than you think. Somebody may ask you, well, why is the bill gone up by $10,000 this month? And then when you start digging into it, you realize that actually somebody else had saved $20,000 and this other team's increased costs by $30,000. So it's, the granular visibility into costs is very important.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then also knowing like, hey, that load test you just ran just jacked the bill up dramatically. Yep. Is good to know too.
Yeah.
That's another favorite of mine.
I definitely like the horizontal markers by release date, and there are different elements of the software lifecycle because it's a lot of times it correlates. You can see as things progress through environments, costs go up per environment.
Mm-hmm. Unless you're doing ephemeral dev, then hopefully it's more of a wave pattern. But I rarely see that wave pattern in companies I've been in. All right. Well, are there any other areas you always want to talk about for automation? I mean, I think, again, this is how you scale your CCOE to be successful. And I think that's the key message we want to deliver here.
Well, I think it's important for a CCOE to prove itself and be able to demonstrate its value back to the business. And so one of the things that I think is important to capture through automation is the metrics of your adoption, right? Being able to figure out, what percentage of the business workloads are hosted on the cloud versus your, or one cloud versus another, or in your data center, whatever your major, motivation is for moving into the cloud, being able to instrument that and demonstrate that. Because it serves as a bellwether of like, are we off on a tangent? Like you have a very static compute workload. Is this making sense? Right? Have we increased value? Are we innovating faster? With all these API driven infrastructure availability elements now, or is it just the same static compute workload that we had the data center? It's just costing twice as much. It's one of those things that I think is important to capture is being able to sort of demonstrate, like, just are you on the right path or do you need to pivot?
Yeah, no, I agree. I was going to pivot over to metrics in general, but yeah, I think you're right. I think the key thing is when you set up your cloud journey, you're figuring out what are the business drivers why we're doing this. And again, if your number one reason is save money, I'd say abort. But you typically are saying, look, we want to get innovation faster. We want to be able to deliver better uptime. We want to move away from spending large amounts of capital to refresh our data center. Whatever those reasons are, those are things that you should be tracking as part of your CCOE. And those are metrics that become important because those are the things you typically sell to the board when you need to go and make a $10 million multi-year commitment to the business, to Google or AWS or to Azure. And then a year and a half later, everyone's like, why are we doing this thing again? Why is it so expensive? Like, and then you need to be able to show those metrics and you need to be able to show that accountability, that you're delivering on those value props that you promised the business. Because if you go down this journey and you do all this moving, you didn't adopt anything cloud native, you didn't sell this thing, you're just being more expensive, and you're not getting any of the other values out of the system, then the reason you're doing the cloud is wrong. And you need to really think that, again, as part of your CCOE and your evangelism, your executive touch points. These are the things that they need to be reminded of regularly because they will lose sight of this journey. They will forget why you're doing it. They will not understand in 3 years from now why, the data center spend went from, $1 million in amortized cost a year to now you're spending $3 or $4 million. on this capability. And they're like, well, it cost me only $1 million back then. And you're like, yeah, but that was an amortized cost. So it was costing you $3 million every time you refresh the hardware, for example. And we also didn't have these 10 new features that would have cost, $10 million in assets to buy, or something else, especially if you're talking about big data and AI and the amount of NVIDIA A100 CPUs and GPUs you'd have to buy and how much that would have cost you. Those are things that you would not have been able to do in the data center for less than, millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases. And so those are things you need to track as part of those dashboards and those adoption metrics. Is what would it have cost me if I kept doing this on-prem? What, either in terms of time, in terms of dollar value, in terms of capital. Those are all really important things because, again, you can build Kubernetes on-prem, you can build Kafka, you can build, NetApp storage filers, you can do all that stuff. It'll cost you in capital, cost you in time and resources and people. And if your move to cloud got you access to PubSub or to Kinesis, and you got access to, cloud storage through Object, and that was significantly cheaper than what you could buy NetApp from. Those are all cost savings that you've now delivered to the business. The business doesn't necessarily understand because those are all sunk costs for them in the past.
I think the C7G example from earlier is really relevant here because if you just invested in something, you've got it for 3 to 5 years before you maybe even have room to upgrade, let alone have the cash to upgrade. We make a change to a Terraform variable, all of a sudden we're deploying onto this new hardware that's just become available immediately. The value of not being tied to legacy technology is amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at the reason why Honeycomb always comes up in a lot of the press releases around Graviton is because they adopt the new Graviton processors very quickly because they have design and infrastructure that takes advantage of it. So when they talk about price per performance, and we talked about, hey, it's a few more cents more expensive for the Graviton 3 versus the Graviton 2. But, overall, they went from a fleet of 1,000 servers to a fleet of 800 servers. And I don't know if these are real. I'm just making this up at this point. That saved them 200 servers worth of compute capacity. That would have been a sunk cost in their data center. So again, that's slow auto scaling, but it's still auto scaling. All right. I think that wraps it up. Unless you guys have something else about CCOE we should talk about, but I think that's a great series. I've really enjoyed hashing this out with you guys.
No, we covered right at the top that it needs a better name, but it's just my biggest complaint. But,
yeah. Anytime I hear Center of Excellence, you kind of get that, McKinsey. Yeah.
Yeah, it does feel very smug.
Yeah.
But it's, overall, I think it's, it's one of those things that I stumbled into, originally, and I've developed some pretty strong, opinions about how it should be done. And it's I think it's a great thing that is being realized across the industry because it's more than just sort of having your IT team manage your cloud environments. It's a lot more partnership with the business. It's a lot more of a sales and evangelism of technology and process and patterns. And it's things that I find interesting and I do naturally. And so I'm glad to sort of see it be sort of codified around me. Thanks.
All right. Well, I do want to pimp 2 TCP talks we just dropped. So first of all, Christine Yen, who is the co-founder and CEO of Honeycomb, which is why it came to my mind as we were talking about CCOE and metrics. We just did an interview with her. Peter interviewed her at reInvent. So this is just Peter doing the interview. So this is his first time interviewing. So keep that in mind. But he did a great job, I think. I listened to it this morning and I was very pleased with how he did. So congratulations, Peter. He can now replace me on the show. No, I'm just kidding. And then he also interviewed Rahul Thakkar, who's the director and general manager of simulation technologies at Amazon Web Services, and who does a much better job explaining what AWS SimSpace Weaver simulations are than we did. So fantastic. If you really want to know what that is and how it works, he is your guy to talk to. He has a length of experience. I was very impressed with his background. 3D modeling, 3D movies, all kinds of 3D stuff and how they use that to do simulations and modeling. So really great. Both those episodes are on your feed or available on the website if you're curious. Great. Both of them are really great episodes. So check those out before we sign off tonight. Any other business, gentlemen?
I don't think so.
Awesome. Well, that's another fantastic week in the cloud. We'll see you all next week.
See you later.
Bye, everybody.
And that is the Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Foghorn Consulting. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and tweet us your feedback at #TheCloudPod. Or join our Slack channel. Go to our website, thecloudpod.net for sign-up instructions.